Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. We're glad you're here. Episode 94. Hard to believe we're almost all the way to 100 times doing this. It's been really fun with all of y'all. Wow, we just moved down south. I don't know what happened there. Today, Friday, February 25th, 2022, we start the day as usual with COVID news. But as our friend Kevin MacLeod said last week, hoping the day comes when we don't need to focus on that every day, and things are looking very encouraging. After the COVID news, I am joined in the studio today for the first time by Ishtiaq Mawla and Ellie Frydendall of miLEAD Consulting. They are here for show number 2 about market and customer discovery. This really important and often overlooked topic that every new product development effort really needs to be thinking about. And they're going to share some of their techniques and some of the ways that they can help out with new product development efforts. After that, Q&A, but first, let's go to the COVID news. All this from healthdata.gov, from the CDC, and looking at new cases, some awfully good news today. That is dropping in the state of Michigan, way back down, really encouraging. Maybe more importantly, that positivity rate down back to 10%. 10% used to seem high until the Omicron wave, where we made it north of 30%. But that's dropping like a rock, so encouraging. Beyond that, never encouraging, the deaths actually as high on a 7-day average basis as they were last spring. So to be honest and fair there, still seeing that rise. And so of course our hearts go out to anyone who is losing someone to COVID, and that's still happening. In terms of hospital admissions, also really good news in the state of Michigan, dropping back down past the 40% mark there. So some really good news. There was the false peak this time around, but things heading in a great direction. And this graphic, state trends in the state of Michigan compared to the winter 2021 peak, normalized everything from hospitalizations to deaths to cases based on that 20 to 21 peak. And you can see the cases there just exploding with Omicron, but the hospitalizations in the state of Michigan never exceeding their 2 prior peaks. Deaths, sadly, very slightly exceeding the peak from the spring. We'll look at the national version of that in just a second, but that's for the state of Michigan. Nationally, the vaccination rate has really plummeted. It appears to be lower than it was in July last year when it was at its lowest. But ever since Omicron hit, that has been steadily declining. We're now to about 500,000 doses a day. Good news out of hospital admissions nationwide. If you had gone with us 3 weeks ago, you would have seen that this was an absolute sea of red. Now there is only one state in that highest red category. And of course, 20 or more beds means that for a hospital to run profitably, they need to keep about 80 beds out of 100 full. So if 20 beds are full of COVID patients, they're full. That's why that number is so important and why that's a red color. But the good news right now, those dropping dramatically. Here's the national case trends compared to the winter 20 and 21 peak. And as you can see, that summer wave never reached where it was during the December 2020 to 2021 wave. But nationwide, the Omicron wave, the hospitalizations did exceed that baseline. The cases wildly exceeded it, but thankfully nationwide, the deaths did not. So a little bit different picture than that in the state of Michigan, but that's what it looks like nationally. We love these graphics from our local hospital systems. This from the University of Michigan hospital system. Kudos again to them for breaking the data down for us. This was February 14th, 43 hospitalized, 13 in the ICU, 9 on ventilators. The breakdown there of vaccinated, boosted, unvaccinated, pre-existing conditions, all of that at a glance. Here we are on February 21st, 46 hospitalized, 9 in the ICU, 7 on ventilators. Motion in the right direction. Maybe more dramatic, though, on the other side of the state. Spectrum Health on February 15th had 258 hospitalized with COVID, This week, that's down to 182. So definitely heading in a good direction there. Henry Ford Health System, they actually had exclamation points on their Facebook page. We've dropped below 100 inpatients with COVID. Now they're from 135 last week to 82. So good news all around. Hopefully that holds. Never hold your breath though, right? Because it is what it is, and we do our best as a community. Let's take a quick look. That's the COVID news. Let's take a quick look. Our friend Jeff Reinfeldt and advisor was on last week telling us about the new version of the Renaissance Undemo Day. They're going to be doing this virtually again. 5-minute pitches, April 27th. That's still, I think, accessible to folks. Those who can apply, this is going to be a women, Black, Latino, Native American, LGBTQ, and Arab American folks can apply for this one. And if you want to apply, the application is here, renvcf.com Undemo app. And you can also reach out to Vincen, V-I-N-C-E-N, at renvcf.com. Well, that brings us to our main event. Today, I am joined in studio by Ishtiaq Mawla, who is the president of miLEAD Consulting, and Ellie Frydendall, who is the vice president of miLEAD Consulting. Welcome, and it's wonderful to see humans.
Likewise.
It's great to have you guys here. Tell us a little bit about what miLEAD Consulting is and how that relates to this whole question of market and customer discovery.
Yeah, first of all, Gene, thanks for having us in studio. Great to be here. Great to represent miLEAD Consulting. What we basically do, we're a consulting organization, nonprofit, 501c3, operating with University of Michigan students, particularly postdoctoral fellows, graduate students who have PhDs, masters, and MBAs. And our mission is twofold. First mission that we have is to help the greater Michigan community, Ann Arbor, Lansing, Detroit, Western Michigan areas, and also beyond the state of Michigan, business community with various consulting services, whether it be for market analysis, customer discovery, competitive landscape analysis, grant writing. We really help early stage, mid stage entrepreneurs with anything that they need with regards to their business that maybe they don't have the time to work on, or they need to offload it, or they need that third party perspective on what they're working on. And so we help, we really are focused on this local business community. And then the second aim that we have, the second pillar, is helping graduate students, postdoctoral fellows with career development by giving them that business experience that they cannot get if they were in their lab environments or during their graduate school classes, for instance. So, and both of these pillars operate in great synergy. The fact that the graduate students and postdocs help businesses also helps with their own career development. And we've been operational since 2014. As of this year, we've done around 100 projects with various clients. We've logged in about 18,000 plus hours of work that we've done in total. And our members are currently about 100 members again, students from the University of Michigan.
When you say members, those are the people who are actually going out and doing the consulting
Exactly,
work.
Yeah. So we basically have consultants, project managers, and a board of directors that Ellie and I are a part of.
Wow, that's really impressive. And of course, one of the topics that you can apply that resource pool to is these questions of market and customer discovery, also things like financing and other areas. Maybe just give us a quick list of sort of the areas that you do touch on before we dive into this one specific one.
Sure, yeah. So we do a lot of market analysis and competitive landscape analysis. Those are our bread and butter kind of projects. In addition to that, we'll do customer discovery. And customer discovery can have various meanings. We'll definitely touch on that today. And then we do grant writing, business planning, any kind of strategy related projects we'll do. again, I think it will be best illustrated by all the examples that we'll go through today. But in broad categories speaking, they can be divided up into what we call secondary research and primary research. So secondary research is we go and do a deep dive into, let's say, literature. This can be using academic papers or business conference papers or databases, proprietary databases that we have access to. And this can be, let's say, market reports, getting some deep insights on what a particular market is looking like. So that's falls under secondary research. And then we have primary research where we go out and seek the data ourselves. So this can be going out and talking to key opinion leaders in various fields, going out talking to customers directly, going out, talking to potential collaborators, going out talking to other competitors or companies. So we go out and we perform this through surveys, interviews, focus groups, a number of different methods that we go out and collect that data. So that's what broadly our work falls into those two categories.
That's I'm glad you brought that distinction up, because people will often say, oh, I did research on this, but those are very different kinds of research, and some are more appropriate at one phase or a different phase, and they return different results, I would think. So that's really cool. Well, tell us each about yourselves. Before we get to market and customer discovery, tell us each about yourselves. What are you guys involved in? What brought you here? What brought you to miLEAD? How did you get here?
Ellie, do you want to start?
Sure. So once again, thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be here in person as these sorts of things start ramping up again. So as you mentioned, I am the Vice President of miLEAD, and I am also a full-time graduate student at the University of Michigan. How
do you do that again?
With a wonderful board who supports us and consultants who are very good at what they do. We have an amazing team behind us. It's certainly no one person by themselves. I'm in my third year of graduate school in the pharmacology department at Michigan, and I had sort of an interesting roundabout way of coming this far. And so I actually started working in industry when I was 18. I did internships for an aerospace company for 5 summers, and I quickly learned aerospace was not for me, and so I moved into a full-time job with a contract research organization working in clinical trials for 2 years. And this was getting closer, but I realized I still wasn't quite at where I wanted to be with my career trajectory. So I came back to graduate school and I found miLEAD, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity for me to take these experiences I had with these large and mid-sized companies and bring this perspective to our teams and our clients who, as Ish mentioned, are these early entrepreneurs, and sort of learning the other side of the business. It's a very different perspective from this angle, but there's still a lot of things that are important for our clients to know as they work with these larger companies, and vice versa. And so it's been an amazing experience sort of getting a more well-rounded view of the business world.
I love how you knew what you were liking about certain things, but then you're also like, it's not quite what I'm looking for. You're just really triangulating in on what you wanted to find there. It's really cool.
Absolutely. Someone said yesterday, I think they called it proactive serendipity. So I'm going to quote someone we were talking to yesterday. And she was talking a lot about how in her career development, she has focused in the moment on what she's looking for, what her opportunities are, and how she can meet those goals. And I thought that was a wonderful summation of how I try to approach my career as well.
Proactive serendipity.
That's right. Yes.
That needs to go on a T-shirt somewhere, I think. That's awesome.
It might be.
It might already be. Okay, I need one of those T-shirts. How about you, Ish?
Yeah. So. My story is not that different from Ellie's with regards to career exploration and finding, but I've been studying chronic pain for the past, 8 years now. So I started in 2014 at Harvard Medical School. Now I'm at the University of Michigan, been through various academic spaces. I'm currently a PhD student in neuroscience. I'll be defending my PhD soon. And so within the chronic pain space, I've been studying various disorders such as fibromyalgia and other chronic back pain, and how various therapeutics, both non-pharmacologic and non-invasive therapeutic techniques, involving, let's say, MRI, transcranial direct current stimulation, various device methods. And so I've been really passionate about this one academic field, and I've made great progress in it academically. However, I was feeling kind of void, and the void was I wasn't seeing this being applied to patients directly. My work was being hidden somewhere in a journal article, which is great. I was finding that fulfilling, but still somewhere it was not directly translating to patients. And so at that time, I was started graduate school in 2018. I found this organization called miLEAD. It was operational at the time. And the thing that I enjoyed in one of the recruitment sessions that I went to was that working with actual business clients in the local community and making impact directly in business decisions and adding that scientific lens. So that really spoke to me, and so I joined the organization, and the first project that I worked on was really valuable in terms of getting scientific or applying scientific knowledge to business questions. And the client basically was looking for some seed and angel investment opportunities. They have a medical device, and they were looking as to how they should pitch to investors. And so I didn't know much about angel or seed investing or things like that, but I really learned a lot through that project, and that really made me passionate about miLEAD, and also I've been part of this organization ever since, and yeah, I've really enjoyed this process so far.
That's awesome. It's so cool when you find something that really rings true for how you want to work and how you want to bring value to the world. So congratulations to both of you. And for anyone who's listening and who is sort of wrestling, okay, so wait, so we've got PhDs and stuff who are doing research on things like market and stuff like that. I don't get it. We met through a mutual contact, and there was mutual interest in a client of ours who didn't understand their market. And when you guys came in and talked to us about how you would approach that, it was like, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense, because the level of analysis that you're asking for out of your consultants is exactly the right thing. We'll get into what that is. But then doing it with students, bringing that benefit to the students, also allows you to deliver sort of a price point that you're not going to find anywhere else. I mean, sure, if you're a big company and you want to hire some big consultancy, great, but the cost is going to be through the roof. What's a startup going to do? How is a new product development effort going to do it? You guys actually have answered that question, which I think is pretty cool, and I think our audience should understand how cool of a niche that is. That's really neat. Well, let's start to go into this question of customer discovery, because that's our topic. Last week we had Kevin McLeod from C2DX, who's running an established business, and he's sitting there asking about mature markets and products that already exist, and he's saying, okay, how does this fit in? You guys are coming on, and you can, from scratch for a product type, start to ask, well, I originally thought you guys would have like this pre-formed list of questions, but as we're going to talk about today, maybe not so much. You're forcing your clients to ask their own customer and market discovery questions. But what is the importance of that? Why should they even be thinking about market and customer discovery? Who cares?
Yeah, absolutely. So as our clients approach market analysis and customer discovery and really starting to understand where their product fits in, miLEAD takes a unique sort of comprehensive approach to these sorts of questions. And so as you've noticed from both of our backgrounds, there's no two consultants or members who are truly alike, and we all have this unique expertise and experiences that we can bring to the table and really start to hone in and have a full perspective on, you know, where does this product belong? Which market is best for it? What space can our client fill that isn't being met yet? And then furthermore, after you know where you're going, who are your customers? What problems are you going to resolve for them? And so on and so forth. And we're going to get into details of each of these as we go along. But I think it's really important, especially before we get into these questions, to touch on one of the things you brought up, which is that we really want to know where our clients are coming from. Each of these cases is unique to some aspect. We can't just take a cookie cutter response or question and say, this is how it's going to be. All of these markets and projects that we've worked with are so unique, and each product is really taking a different approach. And so their strategies differ widely. Even though they're the same in some regards on a very basic level, they each have a unique sort of strategy to success, which is really important and a lot of fun for us as we take on all these different projects.
I love that you focus on that, because if a product wasn't novel in some way, there wouldn't be a unique value to it, right? And so the flip side of that is everyone's going to be a little different, no matter how much you think it's the same. No, that makes a lot of sense. Anything to add to that, Ish, in terms of the value of market and customer discovery?
Yeah, absolutely. I think humans are given this amazing capability to come up with ideas. We are amazing at coming up. If you just have a brainstorming session of...
We're problem solvers.
Yeah, problem solvers. Yeah. We're innately problem solvers. And you can see that in the entrepreneurial mindset that is there in the United States in particular. People are amazing at coming up with new therapeutics, new devices, whatnot. And we see that, let's say, at the University of Michigan or other universities and other spaces, the startup space, the accelerator space, incubator spaces, lots of entrepreneurs coming up with ideas. However, ideas are great, but the ideas will not fruition if you don't have a space for the ideas to manifest. And you really have to understand where is this idea going to go, how will it look like, and what kind of spaces will it fruition. And by spaces, I mean markets. So really trying to understand, I have this great therapeutic or this great device, but who will be my end consumer? What do the end consumer already do let's say, for healthcare, their standard of care, what that is like, for any other space, what that might look like. What is the consumer already doing? What are my competitors like in this space? Am I going to have a hard time entering this landscape? What does regulations look like and barriers to entry in order to enter this landscape? These are all very essential questions that if someone does not consider them, the ideas are great, but ultimately it's not going to make an impact. So that's why, and one of the things you mentioned earlier is that the clients oftentimes haven't thought of these things, or they don't necessarily... They might know that these are important things, but no one has told them that, or no one has formalized it in a way that, or packaged in the way that makes them critically think. And so we, of course, allow the clients to think a lot about their own product, but where we come in is we have this portfolio of thousands of hours of projects that we've done, and we can provide that business acumen and also use our scientific background, like Ellie was talking about. I'm a neuroscientist, she's a pharmacologist. We have folks from all kinds of backgrounds chiming in and providing solutions. So that's the beauty of what we do, but that's how we engage our clients as well.
Yeah, it's really a cool model, and it's so important because we've all seen the entrepreneur, or the inventor, or the scientist who can, like you said, can solve problems wonderfully. And oftentimes the problem wasn't driven by a market, it wasn't driven by a customer, it was driven by some drive to solve some part of how reality works. And that's wonderful, and we need that, and that's a wonderful thing. But yeah, to then ask them, okay, how does that address this? To me, that's a beautiful thing, and you guys are well positioned to help folks ask that. So how do you do it? How does miLEAD go about it? And I've experienced this on one occasion with sort of how you structure things, but tell our audience, like what happens if I'm a startup out there and I'm hearing this and I want to come, and before we talk about some of the details of what we're going to examine together. How do you even scope this with somebody? How do you approach the client, and how do they approach you?
Yeah. So we typically have our clients contact us, and we will talk a little bit more about that information at the end of the show, I believe.
Sure, yeah.
And we sit down and we have a short conversation with them and really get a good idea of where they're at with their product, what they've been thinking about, and what their specific goals are next for the product. And, to touch on scope, we have a lot of very ambitious clients, which is amazing, and we love to see that. But we certainly do have to tailor it down to one or maybe two more specific questions per project. And then we do short projects with them where we can really do a deep dive on these more specific steps, and then take that back and feed it into product development or their overall goal for their company or whatever it may be. And as we go along, often they will come back and we will do additional shorter stints. So depending on what they're coming to us for, it could be a variety of things. Like Ish was saying, we can start with secondary research that identifies their markets more clearly. We can also use our primary research and the networks that we have in order to get a better idea of who their customers are and what their customers need. And so, like we said, just answering these more specific questions for each client is what helps them continue to progress.
I think it's the thing that impressed me when I first encountered you guys was this sense of you're forcing the client not to ask too general questions. You're forcing them to ask specific questions, and you're forcing them to ask it. You're not saying, we've come in and we've analyzed and we believe that this is the most important question for you to ask and us to answer. You're actually forcing them to think, where are we going to deliver value today? Which I love that about any business that comes in and forces the client to reckon with the value that they need right at that point in time. That's awesome. Well, we have a list here of a number of questions. So I asked you guys to think about what kinds of questions are common themes. And I think the first one we had up here, which market should we enter? And I guess maybe even before we start talking about that, a lot of times people will have an idea as to what their device is useful for, their product is useful for, but they haven't thought about all the other things it might be. And hate to say it, maybe they were wrong about the first one, but right about the third one. Give us some examples or some maybe obfuscated case studies about how you approach this question with clients.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have clients who come to us in all sorts of stages of market analysis. And so we've had one client who absolutely came to us and they said, we know we can be in this one market. Where else can we go? And that project was really exciting. This was an engineering company. We brought on some consultants with expertise in that area. And these consultants were able to go out and not only solidify the first case that they had for the market they knew of, but they also went and used their more creative side of research and found these markets that the company hadn't even thought about. They sort of had an idea mulling in their head, we can go here, we can go there. But our consultants actually went out and did the research and said, you can go here, but this is actually the market that's growing rapidly right now. It's smaller, which is why you hadn't thought about it, but it's growing rapidly. Your device is perfect for this technology. You should really go here. And that was huge for that company, which is exciting. But we also have companies who come in and they say, oh, I have 4 markets. This is where I fit best. We've done the research, and they have done the research. And those are good too. And there's a couple of different ways that we can even address those questions. I think one that especially comes to mind is COVID. A lot of people have had strategies pre-COVID that have shifted drastically just as markets change, as in this case, the supply chain changed, and that company was trying to figure out where their spot was in the supply chain again, which was the question they were trying to address. And so we can go back and we can sort of redefine, do you belong here? If you're going to be here, what space and answers are you going to fill for people in this, supply chain market? And how can we really market that to the best of your abilities?
That's amazing. So you can sort of validate the research that they have done or suggest options or possibly shake up their world like you did in the first case.
Right.
That must have been a fun experience to be able to deliver that. Hey, did you think about this market? What's interesting about that, Ellie, that you just brought to us, though, is oftentimes people do glam onto the biggest market, and then in their business plans they'll say, "Oh, it's a $4 billion market, and we'll take 10% in the first year," and everyone's kind of nodding around the table like, maybe, maybe not.
Right.
But I like this point that you brought out, that maybe a market that's smaller, but is rapidly growing, and there's space to insert yourself into it, might be a much better opportunity for a company. Mm-hmm. Was that more primary research? Was that more secondary research? How did your team uncover that kind of an option?
Mm-hmm. For that project in particular, it was secondary research. And these consultants actually approached this client and said, we will do deep dives in secondary and answer these questions about not only market analysis, but also pricing and things like that, which we'll get into later, which can also be done with primary research, I have to admit. I think that one of the things that was really nice for them in using that secondary research is that they kind of had the freedom to be a little more creative. Primary research takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work up front, which is really great, but it's hard to shift strategies as you're coming towards the end of the project. Whereas our consultants sort of had, really thought about this idea in the first couple of weeks, and we said, okay, maybe, but we need a strong case for it. And by the end, we had really just put our resources behind that more off-the-wall idea, and it came to fruition, which was great.
That's awesome. That's a great success story, and hopefully tickles people's brains to say, oh yeah, I think this is where I'm going. But those kinds of dynamics, really good to think about.
Yeah.
Ish, other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I've done a couple of projects with similar and also different stories. So 2 projects that come into mind. Last year during the height of COVID, we worked with a client that came up with this device that was very applicable for COVID-related healthcare. And so they were particularly targeting a lot of different markets, particularly long-term care facilities and also hospitals and various establishments where they could enter. And they had an idea of what the market size would be and things like that. However, where we really came in was provided them those concrete numbers. Okay, here is the number of hospital beds that you can reach out to, or here's the major hospital systems that you can target. Because sometimes what happens is you can get those market numbers that are aggregate. Let's say, oh, this industry is $8 billion with a 5% compounded annual growth rate. But that might not mean anything because it's an aggregate number across the US. You need a more targeted strategy. So the way that we helped our client is provided them with a targeted list of hospital systems and long-term healthcare systems that they could really target. And it's basically a tiered approach that, okay, maybe you should target these big hospital systems first because that's where your device has the most fit. And then we also, in addition to providing that tiered approach, we provide them a timeline of which they could do those activities, and also who do they need to liaise with in these?
So the contacts there at the hospital system.
Exactly, yeah. So part of our of what we do with a lot of projects is we provide contacts of individuals, whether they might be, because the hospital system, if you think about it, and many of the audience members might be knowledgeable about this, it's very complex. You never know who does the actual, like it's not always the doctor, and it's most likely not the doctor who does the business decisions of it. Okay, like we need this partnership with Medtronic, or let's say we need this partnership with Abbott Labs, or we have this device, we're going to have it in all of our beds or all of our rooms. So it's usually that business person deciding, and so we had to provide, let's say, contacts of people that they could reach out to.
And you were able to uncover some of these folks and give them as contacts to the client.
Yeah, so we have access to certain databases of that we use to get contacts of individuals, and it depends on the project. Some projects, what we do is we only give contacts. Other projects, we initiate contacts ourselves on behalf of the client. And then there's other projects where it's more targeted. Let's say they need beta testers of their product, so more hands-on, or let's say they need like collaborators, direct collaborators from whom, let's say, they can obtain some samples, or let's say a certain patient population that they can reach out to that particular collaborator has access to. So yeah, we do various stages of work, but this particular project that I was talking about was just contacts, general contacts.
Wow. That's actually exceptionally valuable, because oftentimes companies are asking themselves, how would I ever get in touch? And to have a team out there working to find out who that is, that's a tremendously valuable thing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was one project that we did last year, and then this year, more recently, a couple of weeks ago, we finished up one that Ellie was talking about, COVID-related changes.
Sorry.
We particularly assessed changes. We particularly assessed COVID-related impact for this, again, this product that the client had come up with, and again, healthcare-related product. And we basically did that assessment of how has COVID really changed the landscape, and it drastically changed the landscape for this particular healthcare niche field. And so that really informed the client as to, okay, we need to change our strategy quite a bit. And in the additional thing that we did for that project was not just, we did some secondary research, but we also did primary research. We spoke to some key opinion leaders, particularly physicians for this one, as to how, in their experience, has the COVID landscape changed things for their practice. And we learned very valuable insights. So
you found some trends that were common among folks.
Yeah, and one thing, as to talking more about our methodology, primary research methodology, we when we do these interviews, we take very detailed notes. We transcribe, of course, with consent of the individuals. We take very detailed notes. We transcribe the interviews. We provide these full transcriptions to our client. And not only that, not only the individual interviews, but then what we do is we collate all of that. We try to make some sense in aggregate as to, okay, what does this population of physicians in aggregate think about this particular thing, and then we see certain trends, and then we also see some subtypes. Let's say maybe this type of specialty physician thinks about this in a certain way, but then this other specialty does not think about this product in a certain way. And how that informs is, okay, then you need to have maybe a targeted approach. Maybe you need to have not just a target market entry, but maybe try to convince folks who are hesitant about the product that this might work in a certain way. So you might change your marketing strategy based on that.
Wow, that's amazing. I think there's a lot of founders also, especially independent founders and stuff, who think to themselves, yeah, I know I've got to do something like that, but to have a team who can actually go out and do that for you and come back with answers that you can then go, oh, okay, I will deal with that in this way. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at our next one here. We've got a bunch of these. We'll try to get through as many as we can. Is there a particular geographical market to launch our product? Because a lot of times inventions are local things. Hey, this would work for me and this would work for my staff. But finish that thought for us.
Yeah, so geography matters a lot in where do you want to enter. So let's say someone who's a local entrepreneur in, let's say, Michigan is going to mainly think about Michigan, let's say, as their initial steps. Or maybe they might have broad, like, this is going to make a worldwide impact. So the geography matters quite a bit. And not just that, but state regulations for certain kind of like healthcare systems or products matter a lot as well. So this one particular project, and this is the same project that I was just describing earlier, where we did the primary research and the secondary research as to COVID landscape, how that changed. We were particularly focused on major states where this particular disease that we were studying, the client was interested in, was more prevalent in those states. But the interesting thing that we found is that prevalence did not just matter, it's also the healthcare that is provided for that particular disease. So this was a specialty type of healthcare, and we saw differences between that. So let's say, as one example, Texas, for example, we found that provided a lot more of those opportunities for treatment of that particular disease than, let's say, a lot of other states, even though Texas, the prevalence might have been lower.
Oh, wow.
So we found that interesting kind of disparity where that typically you would think that the prevalence of the disease would be correlated with the healthcare offerings related to that disease.
Wow. So somebody goes out there and says, this disease has this prevalence in Texas, and it's not very high, therefore Texas is not a beachhead for me.
Yeah.
And you guys do the research and you say, that's right, it's not very prevalent down there, but for some reason they're treating it like crazy down there, and this place where it's really high, they're not doing hardly as much.
Exactly.
You should actually consider this.
Exactly, yeah.
So now who do I go talk to? I might be going to Texas to talk.
Exactly, yeah. So it's a multi-layered, multifactorial problem. Because oftentimes our clients have this unidimensional thing like, okay, our market is the patient, so we need to go with number of patients.
Right, right.
But that's not.
That's what I think. That's what I mean. I hate to admit it, but I think that's what I would have done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But healthcare systems play a lot. How are patients getting reimbursed? Who is reimbursing them for these treatments? Because if you might have a lot of patients, but if your patients are not getting reimbursed, then your uptake in those patients will not be high. So it's a multi-layer, multifactorial problem so that project we were able to give some recommendations about geographical locations.
Wow. And
how that played a factor.
That's a really fascinating one. Ellie, any further thoughts on that one?
Yeah, sort of the same approach, but instead of national, international. We've had clients come to us with one in particular had a new therapeutic that they were working with, and they said, okay, we can go wherever we want, but what should we do? And so we went and looked at different regions. We went to Europe, the US and Canada, and Asia, and we sort of laid it out for them, again, because you're dealing with, the FDA or the equivalents in all of these different regions, and there's different regulations for different places. So what they ended up finding is that launching in the US is really hard. Even though they were a US-based company, the regulations here are high, and there is a lot that you have to do to even get approved. And so what they found, or what really we found and recommended to them, is that if you go to these other areas, you can already launch your product, and then you can start to get this information that will help you get approved in the US. And so if you want to launch sooner, look at these other options. And
to be able to even see overseas demographics that move that needle.
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool. Next one, which product should we invest? This is an interesting one because a lot of times people are working on a whole bunch of different things. They've got a general technology domain. Hey, we could apply it to this or we could apply it to that. Yeah. What should we do? We just ran into somebody the other day who was in that sort of a place. We may need to recommend them to you. Which product should we invest our resources in? What should be our strategy? Give some examples there.
Yeah. So this is actually the same project that I was just talking about. Just like you said, they had their base technology and they had differentiated it into a few different areas, about 4 to 6 different products. And they came to us and they said, well, what do we do? These are all in different markets. What exactly should we be investing our resources in? And so what we did is we did a deep dive in each one of those markets. Whether or not that market was really built out or not, we ended up finding some really interesting information, and we came back to them and we said, well, here are your choices. You have a few strategies. You have this product that can go into these, like we were saying, larger markets that are full of these huge companies that you really can't compete with, and so if you're going to be here, you need to sell your technology. Or you can take your product and go into these smaller markets and stand on your own for just a little bit longer before you either need to partner with these other potential competitors or, again, sell your technology, all depending on where you want your company to eventually end up. And so they could take that information and say, okay, this is the ultimate goal for our company. And this really comes back to, we want them to ask the questions. We can't tell them you should sell or you should partner, because ultimately that's their goal, right? This is their dream. And so they need to figure out which of these options is really going to be best for them. So that was a really interesting one.
That's really interesting because it's also another example of a place where you almost get sort of a contrarian or unexpected answer where oh, sure, it's a bigger market, but if I enter that market, I'm going to get eaten, as
Absolutely.
opposed to this market over here, where if I can enter it and survive longer, I've got many more options.
Right, and they're making tough decisions not only in what the goal of their company is, but also which product are you actually going to invest in. Because at the end of the day, you have to drop the other three and pick one.
Yes.
And put your resources there. And so they had many strategies to choose from, but it's important to give them their options.
Yeah, well, and the point that you make too about needing to drop the three in order to pursue the one. Many times you can leave something on a back burner, but at the same time, for so many products out there, yes, they're in the same family, but the nuances of the development of any one of them is enough to mean what you said is exactly true. You really got to focus your resources.
Right.
Wow, it's good. Ish, any other thoughts on that one about which product?
Yeah, we oftentimes have these initial conversations with CEOs and other executive members of a company where they'll tell us like, oh, we have like XYZ money that we have raised and we have like X amount of time with this money and we really don't know what to invest in. And they're thinking about all these like high risk opportunities, maybe some low risk opportunities, and they just want us to figure that out for them. So we do this kind of, we call these strategy projects where we figure out what the strategy of the company should be in the near term. So yeah, it's a lot of conversations that we have with, and sometimes it's answers that maybe the folks don't like to hear. Like maybe they have their mindset on this one technology or product, and ultimately the results show otherwise, that maybe it's not as promising, and maybe they should invest in it, but down the road, initial investment should be focused on something else. So it's, again, we don't we give our own recommendations, but ultimately it's for the executive members, the CEOs, CTOs, etc., to figure it out that this is what we need to invest in. It's their risk tolerance as to should they go for high risk opportunities or should they go with something that they're already familiar with.
Yeah, it's a hard place to be. I remember when I entered this industry, I guess nearly 20 years ago now, the question has always been there of how do you tell somebody their baby is ugly, right? That's the, the traditional way of saying it. And I think, remember 15, 20 years ago, it seemed to be very much an opinion-based thing. Well, I have expertise in this area, and I don't think you should go there. And then it's just a fight of wills at that point. Like, well, it's my opinion. Well, it's my opinion. And you're sort of at a stalemate. What I love about how you guys are approaching this is you're just the messengers. You're just saying, I did this research. Here's what it shows. If that contradicts what you thought, I'm not here to tell you have to do it this way, but now you've got that data and you can work with it. I think it's just such a healthy way to work with founders and CEOs who have a lot on the line. They've got stakeholders they have to please, and so they ultimately have to be the ones to make the decision. But I think that method of working is just really, really cool.
Absolutely.
How you guys are doing it. Oh, this is a great one. What's the satisfaction level of users with their current technology? Users who actually aren't complaining, perhaps, but we're going to give them a new solution anyways.
Yeah. I have two examples for this. So one was a recent project that I was a part of where we worked with a privacy company. This is so I should say before I start with it, we work not just in healthcare, life sciences, MedTech, biotech, but we also do a lot of software, automotive, engineering companies we do work with. So this is particularly a privacy company that was very much interested in how do particular users deal with privacy in their current day-to-day work. And we're talking about digital privacy in this case. Why was the client interested in this? The client really wanted to know so that they could find the opportunities for improving their own product and potentially selling to current customers and having them switch. So the key word is switching from their current technology to a new technology. And that's why satisfaction levels are very important to learn about. Because most people are not willing to switch things. We find it very hard to switch to a new phone. For instance, there's this I have to transfer my old photos and data and all these, go through all this hassle. So most people are resistant to switch. So what you really have to learn is how are they dealing with their current product? What is their level of satisfaction? And not just overall satisfaction, but sub-domains of satisfaction. So let's say maybe this product that is allowing me for digital privacy, it's doing its job, but it's too expensive. It's taking up too much of my overhead, as one example. Maybe it's not allowing me to store infinite amounts of data. Maybe there's limits to that. So those are the kind of things that we were able to learn from this project. In particular, we sent out a lot of surveys to customers directly. And we had them, we oftentimes give like an incentive, let's say, oh, fill out the survey, we'll put you in a raffle for an Amazon gift card or something like that. And we found really key valuable insights from this for our client. And the client unfortunately wasn't happy with the results because it contradicted with what they were thinking about. But that's the reality of how these things go.
Yeah, that's important data to have. And the problem is companies often will find this out 2 years down the road, and then it's a big disaster. And it's much better to deal with the reality now than it is later.
Yep.
Let me take just a quick time check, and we've only got about 7 minutes left in the show here, so I want to save you guys time to sort of also just tell us more holistically how you guys work. Also, if the audience has any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat in the Q&A, or to raise your hand, and Steve can bring you live. Let's ask you guys, do you want to go to one more of these questions? Do you want to go to some more general description of the company? We do have a bunch here, though I'm sorry we didn't get on them earlier because there's such great stuff here. How would you like to go through? Do you want to do more questions, or you want to jump into the...
We can do an overview of the questions we haven't touched on, and then we can jump into some other things as well. But, I think sort of the point here is that there is so much that goes into, finding your place in the market and customer discovery. And so, when you said, you should have a menu, or you could have had a menu of things that you can look at, it's so broad. And that's why we have to kind of pare these things down. So, other things that our clients are really, questioning and wondering is what are the specific pain points that they can use to develop their product further? Or, what do their customers value about their current products? And, what is it that they're going to have to leverage in order to market to their customers and say, oh, I see that you really enjoy this, and I've invested in this in my own product development, but here's where I'm filling the gaps that you're not seeing in, whatever it may be that you're using. And another one that's pretty important is key opinion leaders, which I think we talked about a little bit early on, but really kind of getting a better understanding of what is going to be important, as well as where are your competitors at? What is their pricing? How can you, package your product such that you're actually meeting a need that's not there in the market? And maybe that is influenced by your competitors and the way they do things, or the prices they have. And those sorts of things. So there's a wide array of questions that you can add on there. Is there anything else that I glossed over, Ish?
No, that's a really, and again, our clients oftentimes will come to us with very generic descriptions of the thinking. They'll explain it to us in very basic terms, like, oh, I have this technology that I developed in my lab, and I don't know what to do with it. We've had many clients come to us with that kind of and then we'll slowly help them out, break down their thought process as to what they're thinking, and try to prioritize what is next for them. And that's why we love working with, we work with all kinds of clientele, but we love working with early, mid-stage entrepreneurs who maybe they're really passionate about this thing that they've come up with, and they just want some help. Or maybe some established folks who are running companies locally, and they're making a lot of profit, and they want to reinvest some of that profit back into developing more R&D and things like that. So we love helping those kinds of clientele in particular. So and we're great because of the fact that a lot of these folks are not able to afford expensive consulting services. So if you look at in the consulting world, the McKinseys and the Boston Consulting Groups and the Bain and Companies, they are very expensive, and they primarily work with Fortune 500 companies. And they charge like $1 million per engagement or something on that order. But where we come in is we're pretty affordable, and we love working with that niche population of early, mid-stage entrepreneurs who can actually afford our services. So.
Yeah, I think it's a really wonderful offering. Well, we've got just a couple minutes left here. Tell us sort of how someone approaches you, what projects look like, how do you scope them, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so the way that we get approached is you can reach out to us on our website, which is miLEAD.org. You can email us at clientservices@miLEAD.org. The great thing is you can shoot us a quick email with some questions you might have. We'll set up an initial call with you. We'll figure out what you're looking for exactly, what your timeline is, what kind of priorities you have. And then based on that, we'll staff projects, a team. We'll set out a timeline and an engagement letter, which is basically a statement of work where we'll outline the type of work we'll do. We're very formal with these things, so and that's how we start working with you. And we encourage anyone who might be having lingering questions, maybe things about the market that they've not thought of, or maybe they want a third-party opinion about something that they're passionate about. Feel free to reach out to us.
That's awesome. We have a question here from Jeff Frydendall from Renaissance Venture Capital. He said, how do you select projects to work on? How do you say, okay, yeah, this is a fit, or no, this isn't a fit?
Sure, yeah, that brings up a great point. We certainly do have boundaries within our capabilities, and so there's a couple of ways that we go about this. The first that we've sort of talked about is that when our clients come to us with big ideas, we pare it down into these smaller, more specific questions that we can answer for them. And so sometimes the answer is just, we're going to have to split this into 2 projects. But we also have a lot of data on the boundaries of our capabilities, whether that is primary research or secondary research, and that shifts based on what the client is coming to us with. Sometimes the client comes to us and says, I have this set of work done, I just need it finished, and we say, absolutely, we can certainly take this over, whereas maybe we couldn't have done that whole batch to begin with. So it certainly is a case-by-case basis. But to answer your question, we discuss all of that in our initial meetings with the client and have a very clear written understanding of what exactly the boundaries of that work is. And maybe if there's questions that we brought up in our research or that were left unanswered, we can certainly initiate a second engagement with the client.
I like, from what I've understood of how you guys work, that it's kind of you're kind of looking for the right size scope. You're not just kind of going, yeah, we'll take that huge thing. You're saying, no, what's the thing that we can answer here?
Exactly,
Right.
and just to elaborate on what Ellie said, we don't do things like, let's say, regulatory filings or deep work, that kind of work that you might be doing with clients. So some of those deeper work that we might not have the capabilities of, and we might not have the knowledge space for. So, but all of these things are discussed with the client up front as to what our capabilities are. We don't take on things that we're not able to do. That said, we're able to do a lot of different spaces of work.
That's awesome. And you can find all those spaces of work on the miLEAD website, so I encourage you to check that out. Ellie, Ish, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Yep.
This has been great.
We'll look forward to connecting in the community. Hope you guys reach out and have benefited from this. Next week, we will have Jonathan Fay talking about I-Core. He will be back with us. Can't wait to see you on the next episode of MedTech Crossroads. Thanks for being with us today. Bye-bye.